Welcome to the Steady On Stronger Together podcast. I am your host, Angie Ballman. Today's episode is a celebration of friendship. My two best friends, Lisa and Maria, join me again for a book discussion, and we are welcoming today author Cara Putman for a conversation on her latest legal thriller, Lethal Intent. In the book, the main characters develop a romance after starting out as friends, and Cara shared with us during the interview that she and her husband began their relationship in much the same way. Friendships grow and change, and God sometimes brings unexpected things as we walk through life together. And if you happen to be a regular listener who knows I generally go deep into a topic, have no fear. Through the conversation, we will touch on the foster care system, the questions that arise in the relationship between technology and medical advances, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. Let's listen in. Good evening, Steady On community, and welcome to the April Virtual Book Club, where we have been reading Lethal Intent by Cara Putman. And Woo-hoo! Cara is with us tonight, and we are so glad to have you this evening. I'm going to tell you, Cara, that this is the first time in book club that we have done any kind of like thriller or whatever. This is all for Lisa, because Lisa gives me a hard time. She's our like, she's like, oh, I liked the book very much, but it would have been better if someone would have gotten killed. That's like...
My daughter, my 12-year-old was reading it, and she was like, Mom, you other person.
Everyone's dying.
There is a body count in this book, and that is a little usually in my romantic suspense or my legal suspense, there might be one or two, but this one was a little more intense in that way. So I hope you really enjoyed it, and the rest of you heard as well.
Yeah. We liked it very much. I already know this about the other ladies. We liked it very much. And this is our first, I think I'm right about that for Lisa and Maria too. This is our first Cara Putman read ever. So this is how we're meeting you. Yeah, no, it won't be our last. Yeah. But Bethany Turner is a good friend of ours, Steady On community. She's been here a couple of times. We love Bethany. And so since I'm connected with her, I saw her on your page a while back, and I'm like, who is this Cara girl? I need to check this out. And when I saw the kind of books you write, I'm like, oh, I have to do this for Lisa.
Oh, that's so fun. And yeah, Bethany's she's a delight. And that was the first of my book chats that I did. And now they've been going strong, and it's such fun. I think people are still hungry during COVID. I mean, it's starting to kind of temper down a little bit. People are starting to get out, but there's something so special about being able to do those kind of live chats and get to participate. And so she's awesome for that kind of thing.
Yes. Bethany, she'll hit your curveballs, whatever. She doesn't care. She'll talk about whatever. She's great. So, well, we just kind of jumped right into this, but I want to introduce Cara, and I'm so delighted that you're here tonight. Cara is an award-winning novelist. She's been writing since 2005, some 30 plus books. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 34 or 35. I lose track.
I think that's just crazy insane. I've talked to enough authors that some of them, I think this is 12. I think this is, I'm like, how do you not know? Because it's just like such a labor of love, but good for you that you've kind of lost track. And you are a practicing attorney, a law professor, right? A wife, a mom, and lives in Indiana. And we have something in common. I learned we both have MBAs. I also have an MBA. So you are like extra schooled, educated, right? Law and business. And you teach at a business school. You teach law at a business school. Is that what you do? Is that right?
Yeah, I do. So I teach undergrads and grad students, and I teach like a core business law class, which I call like law school in a semester, and then employment law and ethics. And so I just have the best job in the world because I get to work with all these really bright students at different levels and help them just get prepared for what God has for them next, which I love to do that.
Yeah.
I always say I'm overeducated because I got my MBA after I'd been teaching for a while, and they're like, we'd like to make you full time, but it might be helpful to have the MBA. I was like, okay, why not? And I really enjoyed that.
And you have kids at home still, I assume, right? Well, actually, I know you do because I was watching you. Was it with Bethany when your daughter came in to ask you if she could use the avocado? That's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have 4 kids, and our oldest is a junior at Purdue, which is where I teach. But she's in health and human sciences going into public health, which is like perfect timing right now. And then our 17-year-old will be a freshman at Purdue next year. And then we have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. So we have our our littles. And so it's a lot of fun. We have been blessed with some amazing kiddos, and it's just a joy to be their mom.
You wear a lot of hats.
I do. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 3 and I'm a type A. I love being like operating at like a high level and much more effective too. So I love doing lots of different things. And I love that like my day job is teaching, and it's very kind of left brain law and business focused. And then the writing allows, I call it my right brain comes out to play. And so balance the two. I really, really love that God's given me opportunities in both spaces. And so I feel kind of well-rounded, I guess, in some ways.
I love that. That's great. I think that's great. Do you get a lot of inspiration from your students for characters or storyline?
Not so much yet, although the next book that I'm hoping to write will actually be set at I'm creating a small college in Virginia. So kind of extending on this series, but moving a little further out from DC. And it's going to be set a lot of scenes in the classroom, and kind of the idea is Amanda Knox, only flipping it so it happens in the United States with an exchange student who comes here, and that whole, how do we handle innocence and guilt and when people don't behave the way we expect them to, and so kind of some of those unconscious biases and things. And so I'm really excited to dig into that. And I love setting it kind of in that college environment, because there are so many different things to interact with on a day-to-day basis, and they're from all over. And so I think it'll be a really good setting to kind of explore some of those. Okay, we think everybody should act like this, and yet that's not the way God created us. And so how do we deal with that? And there's some murder or two.
Do you have any crossover characters in your books, or are they always new?
Yeah, so Lethal Intent is Act 5, but it's a standalone. So the Justice series, so you, in Carolyn's book, you see Hayden and Savannah and Jamie and Emily. And so each of them have their own story, and it's completely freestanding. But for people who like series, there's little threads, like Hayden gets engaged in this one. But if you haven't read Beyond Justice, you'll be like, oh, okay, it's a friend who gets engaged. But if you've read the others, you're like, finally.
Oh, good. I look forward to that for Caroline.
I know, right? Is there one more book for Caroline and Brandon?
What was really interesting is Caroline's book was originally going to be book 3. So I'd had all this time to think about hers. And then the law changed on me for Brandon's storyline. But what was really interesting is I've had several readers say, you've got to write another book with them, because we have to know what happened with Brandon's brother.
Oh, Brandon's brother. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I did. But it was one of, it was, as an author, sometimes you're thinking about like the backstory, and you're trying to figure out how to give the character enough depth that people can relate to him, and they don't feel like a cardboard cutout. They feel like a real person with all the issues and drama that we live with on a daily basis. So I was like, okay, he needs to have had a brother. Something should have happened. Because there's a little bit of, I don't know if you've seen or read Blindside, the Michael Orr story. So in some ways I was thinking something kind of like that for Brandon, only without the deep drama background that's in Michael Orr's story, but also without that family that comes and rescues him. He has to kind of rescue himself. So a little bit of an overtone of that kind of a feel to Brandon. But then there's this brother, and it's not uncommon. I do adoptions. That's about the only area of law that I still actively practice in on a consistent basis. And a lot of those have come through foster placements. And then I've got others where it's, a birth mom placement. And it's a tragic system. I mean, it just really is a system that I'm like, there's so much. There have been so many times where I've been sitting in either a child in need of services hearing or something, going, okay, God, how do we fix this? You've got me here. There has to be a way to fix this. And I haven't figured it out yet. And I hate that. And so, trying to getting inspiration from those experiences, from thinking about how do we try and solve this. There are these kids that are getting lost. And then the idea of the kids aging out of the system, and they just kind of, all right, you're 18, you've got it figured out. And I'm like, almost 18-year-old. I'm like, they were amazing kids. They are amazing kids. They were not ready to adult at 18. And our 20-year-old tried really hard. And we were like, no, God placed you in a family. You don't have to do it all on your own. But what would it be like for these kids who are just kind of like, okay, well, good luck. Trying to wrestle with some of those issues. And I totally was like, oh yeah, there's this brother. And so for readers to be like, what's this story? I'm like, I have no idea.
That was just an added element to Brandon's story, right? At this point. Yes. But it could totally be a story. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the beautiful thing when you create characters, I think, is the people around them. We come to love them as well, and we want to know more about them. So, which kind of leads me to this question, because this book, even though it's not about the children, it's so much about the children, both the ones that are struggling with life-threatening illness, but also the ones that are struggling with life-threatening circumstances, if you will, in a very different. So you answered that a little bit with your passion for adoption law, but what kind of helped you, I don't know, weave those stories together or cross that? Because I thought it was heavy in that those stories are heavy, but I thought you just did a beautiful job of not letting us get, because as you say, those issues are they can be so entangling, if you will. I don't know. Would you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually where I get to sing my editor's praises, because I have had the supreme honor of working with Erin Healy on this book and Flight Risk. And then I worked with another fantastic editor on the prior 3 books. And one of the things that Erin did is she was going through and doing like what we call the macro edit. So I turn in the draft. It's as good as I can get this story. And then that's what I love about traditional publishing, is I turn it over to an editor and I go, okay, you get to help me figure out, how do I make this the best story it can be? And one of the things she said is, she's like, Cara, you've got all these kids, but you're not really developing them into characters. And they were more cardboards. They were, I mean, like, even, I just forgot her name, the little girl who's
Bethany
will help you.
Bethany, yeah.
There were some interactions, but they were a shadow of what they became. And I realized one of the beautiful things about having children in a book is it allows you to give those moments of humor. Like when the boys are helping Brandon with the weeding and they're pulling the flowers, and like every kid does that. And yet it just gave this moment of getting to see Brandon as this really the teddy bear side of him. He's loving on these little boys, and he's kind of, being a father, big brother type figure to them. But it gives you that moment to kind of catch your breath as a reader and go, whew, okay, it's going to be okay. And then you go right back in. And there were heavy moments with Bethany, but there were also really light moments. And so I think that actually having the kids helped. And one of the things I realized is I was thinking about this series overall, and it was not intentional at all. I mean, it's not like I sat down at the beginning and went, all right, this one is going to deal with the juvenile immigration crisis, and this one's going to deal with domestic violence and saving a child who's caught in a situation, and this one's going to deal with childhood sexual abuse, and this one's going to deal with a whole nother kid issue. But in each of these books, there has been this thread of protecting our most vulnerable when it comes in, and there's other vulnerable populations, but looking at these different aspects of how children can be at risk and what can we do to step in. I guess my mother heart just got really activated in this series in a way that, looking back today, I can see it, but it also just, it allows a fleshing out of the characters, because we are different when we're kids than we are when we're with adults. And so it kind of created this really interesting juxtaposition.
I think that pain speaks to, I'll just tell you who you have here, because Maria's been a first grade teacher for 20 plus years. I'm a pastor and have abuse and trauma in my childhood background. Lisa's a retired pediatric nurse. And so we come at this from like different, but like I could feel the tenderness that you had towards the children, and also towards the storylines where, where these main characters, they have pain in their childhood and background in their growing up years. And so like, even though that wasn't the focus of the book, I could appreciate, I think your readers probably really like maybe love those characters when you're able to share that part of us with them, right? A little bit more. I don't know. What do you ladies think about that? I was thinking about when she was talking just now, I hadn't thought about that before, but how both of you probably had a tenderness towards these storylines because of your compassion towards children, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Bethany storyline, pediatric nurse in a children's hospital on the floor that did bone marrow transplants.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
So did I get it close?
It was really, I just felt sick for Bethany. I wanted to be in the room with her. She needed a caregiver in there all the time. I took care of those kids. A lot of times the parents were there and sometimes they weren't. And I can't tell you how close you get to those families when you are taking care of their children for months at a time. And yes, it was the best part and the worst part of the job. And yes, you nailed it, because I loved her little sassy side. And I think you kind of mentioned that, because kids are resilient.
Yes.
Is what I, learned. Yeah, I couldn't take care of adults because, they're kind of whiny, but I thought, you nailed it.
Oh, I'm so glad, because that's one of the things I always want to honor the story. I want to honor the people who've actually lived that journey. And Bethany was actually inspired by one of my friends and her son, who started his battle with leukemia at 14. And he was patient 0 and patient 1 on a couple different. And so that actually kind of inspired that whole thread of kind of thinking, okay, how far would you go as a parent to save your child? And then she actually was able to connect me with the pediatric oncologist who oversaw his care. And it was so fun. We're at Panera and she's drawing on a napkin. Here's the cell process, and here's the white blood cells and how it breaks, or, blood cells and how they break down. And I'm like, I went to law school and not medical school for a reason.
Right. And I think it's so great that you can get those things right as much as possible. I noticed in the back of the book, you were talking about the changing law in the foster care system in Virginia and how that gave you angst, right? Because you're like, I really want to get this right. And so for those of you who actually, because some people pick that up, with Carolyn's storyline, and the way that she grew up, I'm like, I'm feeling that as you're writing some of those things. And as the pediatric nurse, Lisa's feeling that. And so I think that's an important part of a fiction story, even, is that, you kind of get underneath that and say, what's the reality of this industry or this profession or whatever. So that's excellent. Yeah, it was good. So good. Yeah.
Well, and like I said, that's one of the things that, especially with the first couple of books in this series, like Beyond Justice and Imperfect Justice and Delayed Justice, it was really trying to go, hey, church, we've got to wake up to a couple of these issues. Domestic violence is real, and you can't pretend it doesn't exist or that it's just being overblown. And I'd worked with women from the YWCA domestic violence shelter, being an attorney for some of them. I'd walked a friend and a cousin through it. And I was like, we have got to wake up. And so trying to help people become empathetic to, oh my gosh, this is real. And this is something I think that's one of the beautiful things about fiction, is it can help us feel and understand stories that aren't ours, so that then when a friend is going through something, we can go, oh, I haven't walked your journey, but I have a better idea of how I can come alongside you.
Yeah. The girls always laugh at me because I tend to find the deep things and things that they're like, what, even when we talk to Bethany, and Bethany gives me a hard time too, but in a good way, because I'm like, well, let's talk about what's underneath that. I'm always like, why do they behave that way? Right. What's underneath it? And I love that part of it, because they're real in that, maybe these people aren't real, but this story is real to someone, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of, okay, so let's talk about Brandon, because one of the things that you talk about in the book is how Brandon, maybe because of his past, I don't know, you can shed some light on this, has a hard time opening up to Carolyn, telling her the whole story. Why do you think that is for Brandon, or anyone? Why is that hard for us, you think, just opening up to people? And why did you think it was so important to kind of shine light on that to Brandon? hey, this is part of the problem in this relationship, that he's struggling to open up to her.
I think that for a lot of people, for a lot of us, it can be very challenging to open up because it involves a lot of risk and vulnerability. And many people have had those experiences where they've tried it and it failed, or they've been failed by people. And so then those walls go up and it's like, I can only rely on myself. And Brandon he's shown up in several earlier books where he's kind of that buddy character that other people rely on, but he was always just kind of like, I'm the rock for everybody else, but nobody's the rock for me. And so I thought it was really important to help him walk through that and to get to that point, because if you're going to explore a marriage, then it's the most intimate relationship you're going to have, but it's intimate at a emotional level or it's not going to work. And so you've got to learn to be able to do that. And I also thought it was important. This one was kind of fun to write because in a lot of ways it mirrored more my husband's and my story, where we were friends for years. And then we had to make that choice. Are we just going to stay friends? Or are we going to explore and see if marriage is an option? And that is a huge risk, because if it doesn't work, you've just lost a friend.
Your friend.
And so it was that kind of a dynamic as well, that then even when you're really good friends, you're going to still hold some things back. And if you're going to go to that next level, part of that is lowering those barriers and lowering that guard to be like, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to trust you. And so I thought for Brandon that was going to be a really important part of the journey. And Carolyn, in some ways, had been the same. She was the one who was holding everybody together. She's the one who shows up and is just present and is there for people, but she's very much held herself kind of aloof, where people don't understand all of the things going on inside her, all the stuff she's dealing with, the fear, the trauma that she's had. And if you read Delayed Justice, I mean, she's very much the strong secondary character helping Jamie deal with her severe trauma, and never once mentions, oh, I understand because I've watched something similar, but just that, hey, I'm here for you. I'm going to be here for you. I'm not going to let you walk away from me, but I'm not going to open up to you. So in some ways, their journey is kind of parallel. And for this to really happen, they both have to be willing to risk and be vulnerable. And that is scary.
I loved what you said. Her friend, Carolyn's friend, I've lost her name. It starts with an H, that says, when they're at Hayden. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. She talks about how fear, I wrote this down, fear loses weight when brought to the light. And I thought that these ladies will attest to this, because I think it's Brene Brown that says it, that I first heard say that shame loses its grip, or she says shame can't grow when it's brought to the light. And I talk about that a lot too. And so when I read that, I'm like, oh yes. I love that. But isn't that's kind of what you're talking about right here, right? Like there's this, we're afraid of something and we hold it close, not realizing that actually, if we can say it out loud and people don't run away, because they're probably not, but we imagine that they're going to, right? If they don't run away, then actually it loses the power that it has.
And there's something too, I mean, I really think one of Satan's tools is that he gets us to believe we're so damaged or we're so broken and nobody else has ever lived this. No one else is going to accept us. And we do that by keeping secrets. And it's when it comes to light that the Holy Spirit can, clean it up, that people can speak life into us and show us, no, that's not really what's going on. And it's an ongoing process, and it requires that risk. It requires vulnerability. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many friends you have. You need those 2, 3, 4 that you can be like, man, I am struggling right now, because there is such power in speaking it and bringing it out of the shadows so that it loses its power. It loses its threat. But that's hard. And so I really think that was part of what Carolyn had to learn. And so many of us do. And if we can learn it earlier, the freedom that comes from that is just immense.
30 plus books in, is writing your story still a vulnerable process for you, can I ask?
Oh, absolutely. It is so, because anytime you invest months writing a story, developing these characters, there's a huge part of yourself that goes into it. And every writer is going to tell you something different. I could go through and I could say, here's the part of Carolyn's story that God was using to work something out in me. And here's the part of Jamie's story, or literally every book, there's something. And so it's very vulnerable and risky, because what if nobody likes it? What if nobody connects with the characters? What if they go, this is the biggest bunch of garbage. Nobody should ever read this. And, it's one of those, I can look at it and I can go, okay, I've got 4.6 stars on Amazon. I've got, and I've got over 140 reviews or whatever. People are liking this, but it's still so risky. Mm-hmm. And then there's another book. Is the publisher going to be willing to give me another opportunity? And, it's a very vulnerable process.
What I have learned, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this, and then I'm going to ask Maria a question, so get ready. But what I have learned is if you're not getting that affirmation, if you cannot feel that affirmation on the inside, like from the Holy Spirit, you are beautiful, you are good because I've said that it's so, right? Like if you can't receive that, then it doesn't matter how many reviews or how many, it's like you can have the 5 stars or the, whatever. And it's not going to speak to that, I think, that's been my experience anyway. I don't know. Because there's, like you said, there's always another one coming and it may not do as well. Or we look at the one, why do we do this? Don't do this. Why do we look at the one review that somebody was like, oh man, that wasn't very good, when there are like 12 all around it that are like, it was so good,
Exactly. Or you can look at, and I adore Bethany, but Bethany had this happen. Why can't I have that happen? Or, it's
the comparison thing.
Be careful about comparison, because God has every writer, has every person on a very different journey. And so one of the things I love about Christian writing is we are really supportive, but I still have to be on guard about, well, God, why for me yet? Or why hasn't that happened? And instead go, but you know what? I've got 30 some books out and I've won a few awards, but really if I'm encouraging other people and if a story touches a few lives, that's good enough. And so, but it's an ongoing battle, especially as an Enneagram 3. It is an ongoing.
Well, just so you know, you have a 1 in this box, and Lisa's a 7, and Maria's a 9. So we're well. So Maria likes books that wrap up nicely with a bow. That's how we say that's the ones that Maria likes so much. So I just have to ask Maria, did it wrap up neatly enough for you? Or
I gotta say, I'm sorry, Cara. I need to know. About Brandon and Cara. I don't want to do any spoilers. It was enough of a bow, but not quite as sparkly as no.
Maria can't hit if it's not a Hallmark Christmas movie. Maria's like, it didn't end well.
No, but I really enjoyed it. I really did. I watched how many pages I had left. I'm like, oh, there's hope. There's hope.
So you have to get them married or whatever.
Yeah. No. I was satisfied.
No, it was so good. I just so much loved the idea of the foster home and even the tension of the foster home. Did you say that you had investigated, there's something like this in Arkansas that you kind of based it off that part was true? Would you talk about that just a sec?
I think it's the Arkansas Children's Home or it's a Baptist group foster home. And what happened is the federal law changed in 2018. But in 2020, Virginia still didn't have the regulations for how they were going to implement the law, as the book is literally getting ready to go to print. This is driving me crazy because I really care about getting the details right. There are some authors who are like, it's fiction, I can do whatever I want. And then I tend to be, number one, I want to honor people's stories. And then if I'm writing historical, I go, you're not going to necessarily read all the research books I did. So I want to make sure I get it right so that you're not getting misled and all that. But the way that the law changed is now it's only supposed to be trauma-informed care, and it's only supposed to be for like 30 days, which I can understand intellectually why they did that. But I'm like, you totally are missing a whole population of foster kids who need help, like sibling groups or older kids. But there's not necessarily heavy trauma. They don't have to have been abuse victims or have tragically lost whatever, but they need a safe place to land. And so, and foster parents are amazing, but not everybody can take a sibling group of 4 or a sibling group of 2 and 3 and 4. And so, what I had worked out in my head is, well, maybe instead of it being the group home that's licensed, maybe it's the individual families that'll be licensed, and then they'll, kind of rent and work together, kind of collaborate. And then Trisha Goyer, my friend, who actually has adopted a group of 4 foster kids. I mean, they've adopted 7, but one of them is a sibling group of 4 that they got from this home in Arkansas. And she actually connected me with the executive director, because I was like, okay, can I just talk this through with you? And I was so relieved, because what they're doing in Arkansas is exactly what I had kind of imagined in my head. And he's like, we're the first that I know of that are doing it, but I think this is going to work, and this is what we're doing. And so I at least felt that then having Brandon do the same thing wasn't like out of left field or ignoring the law. It was a creative solution because I mean, I understand why they did it, but they're completely missing a huge population of foster kids who need special care and help.
Brandon was such an interesting character to me because this like ex-football player, big tough guy with this like ridiculously sensitive, beautiful heart, you know, that in a good way, and you could see how in some ways so emotionally tender, and yet, you know, but he also had the like discipline or the wherewithal to just like I can solve this problem. I can keep it. I don't know. I really liked him. I really liked him. Yeah.
He was so much fun to write. I mean, he really was. He was just from the beginning. I could imagine exactly what he was going to do. And my heroes don't tend to be the law enforcement. In fact, I don't think, well, other than one of my very first romantic suspense, I haven't done the firefighter policeman, because when I polled my readers, they were like, we want to have heroes that are like the guys we know, and really all these alpha guys. And so Trisha actually helped me brainstorm the idea that he would be this foster group home leader. And I loved it. And the moment that clicked, he just was fully formed in my mind. It was just like, he was this fully formed 3-dimensional character, and just so much fun to kind of flesh out and explore, because he's this teddy bear, this big burly, you know, who's just got this really soft heart, which made him so much fun to write. I mean, like, he remembers that she likes a specific soup from Panera and shows up with, who would love that?
Yeah,
I'm sure it was broccoli cheddar. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was a little bit jealous of Caroline because I thought she got real lucky because I loved him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Thomas Nelson, I have like the in-house editor, and then I have the contract editor. So Erin Healy's the contract, but Jocelyn Bailey's my in-house. And she was like, you are like this hero factory. These are amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I come up with good guys.
Well, hey, I know before we let you go, I want to ask you one question that we always end on when we talk with someone. And that is there anything, we love resources and we just love listening to other things. Is there anything that's in your personal life right now that you are reading or studying, watching, doing, listening to? Anything goes. What are you doing that's just keeping you connected to God right now?
So I'm actually working through, I think it's The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. Oh my gosh, that is a tome, but it is so good and it's so rich. And so I'm doing like 5 or 6 pages at a time, because it's all about Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount and understanding it in the context of what was really happening. It's so good, but so dense and rich. And then totally different level, reading Shannan Martin, Ordinary Places, the Ministry of Ordinary Places. Okay. And that has been a fantastic flip to it, because it's much more, not quite a memoir. I mean, there's more to it than that, but just the idea of how can we love people well wherever God's placed us. And so I think especially as people have just been so isolated this last year, and I've seen it in a unique way because I spend a lot of time on a college campus and it's a major university. People are so hungry for connection, and yet it's so hard. And so just really trying to think strategically about, okay, how do we do it? How do we, as the, arms of Christ, reach out to people? So like on Saturday, we're taking our puppy to campus, because usually we would invite students to our house for, a cookout or something once a semester for each class. And I can't do that. I mean, I literally can't. The rules don't allow it right now. But I was like, we can bring our puppy to campus. We can be outside. And if they want to stop by, they can. I've learned students miss their pets. They miss their siblings and they miss their pets. But, and again, there's the science that says there's something very relaxing about petting an animal. And it's good for our puppy to get the exposure. But it's one way I can tell my students, I see you and I care about you. I've done a lot of walking meetings on campus. And so, it's been good to kind of think again about, okay, how can I appreciate where God's placed me and not take it for granted and not wish for greener pastures somewhere else? And how can I be fully present where he has me? And how can I see those people and love on them in the way that's going to best show Christ to them? And I really think it's not always words. It really is, you have to earn the right to say the words, and you earn the right by caring and showing up. And so I'm really blessed that I get to do that with students all the time from literally all over the world. But it's been a great reminder just to read through this book again and be like, okay, as I'm, walking on campus and praying and going, okay, God, how do we best be present and available to them today? Because what worked a year ago isn't going to work today.
I live in a university town also, and my husband works in administration in higher ed, and I love when the people who are like in administration too, professors also actually, but they just participate in. Matt always works in move-in day, and he always, he's just around like that when things like that are going on, because it helps us remember. You can get so bogged down in probably your lesson plans or teaching plans, whatever, that sometimes you actually lose sight of why the university is here and all the goodness that it brings to this community and, and all that. And so sometimes it's just to take a walk and to participate in those kind of things, where the kids are, is just so great. And when did they become kids? I'm like, not when some years ago, I met Matt on campus or something, and I'm like, when did these people get so young? Like, I went to college here, and they used to be my age, and now they're so not my age.
No, unfortunately, they're graduating college. We have several that are graduating.
I know, and their kids are even older. Yeah, I know. So how did this happen to us? But it does. Yeah. So before I ask Cara for resources, I was going to turn to you guys and ask if there was anything else you wanted to ask her, or just tell her about the book that you really liked. So I can be quiet if I discipline myself. So anything else that you girls wanted to add?
Well, all I know is my reading list has just grown exponentially tonight. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I will.
And I just want to reiterate, I love the light on the group home and keeping the foster sibling sets together. That's an important piece. And I see that. I actually oftentimes see them in separated pieces because they're removed from their parents, and they have to be placed with other families. And so I've seen both sides, but I appreciated that piece of Brandon's story. So
Maria teaches first grade, and she specializes in reading recovery. And so she works a lot with kids that are dealing with difficult home situations. So
yeah, no, you're doing really important work. Absolutely.
Yeah. She's an angel. So
yes, we all are.
Cara,
God has each in a special place.
He does. Well, it's just what she was saying, right? Where has God put you, and what's the ministry that he's called you to there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cara, thank you so much for your time tonight. And again, the book is Lethal Intent, and it's one of 30 plus, and it's the 5th in this. I would like to read about the other ladies now. I really would.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So we'll get on that. Yeah. Well, and do you have another one coming out? I know this one's pretty new. So
this is out in January. Okay. So right now I'm in the process of, I've got a proposal out, and I'm getting ready to start working on the first book.
All the best with that, because the journey just keeps starting over again, doesn't it? You go a little farther down, but then you keep starting over again. So, but yeah, all the best with that new book. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
So much fun.
Good. Until next time, peace.
I hope you enjoyed learning about Cara Putman's book, Lethal Intent. I encourage you to check out this book and others by Cara. The stories she crafts will undoubtedly draw you in and leave you asking, who done it? And if you like the idea of reading a book with friends, please join us. Every month on the Study On Facebook page, we have a new book selection. And most of the time, the author joins me and a couple of friends to discuss the book, and we'd love to have you. You can find more information by searching @LiveStudyOn on Facebook, and you can find that and a lot more information in today's show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.